Yeah. Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all to this webinar, Early Stage Entrepreneurship and Innovation Rising Out of the Crisis. A very pertinent topic for each one of the students who has joined us today here on this webinar. We always talk about seeking jobs, but a bigger goal is to be a job creator. And this is what this webinar talks about, will talk about in terms of this pandemic that everyone is in right now, which will get over, the crisis will get over, and how you can innovate, bring in disruptive innovation, and can be entrepreneurs of the future. And I have with me Professor Dr. Gurinder Singh, sir, who is a Group Vice Chancellor, Amity University. Well, what should I say? He's always been that motivating force. He has led from the front, and he has always motivated us to get luminaries such as Dr. Mark Gruber, who's the speaker for today, onto these platforms, even in these unprecedented times, ensuring that the learning never stops and the students should get the best of what the world has to offer. So with this, I also welcome Professor Dr. Mark Gruber to this webinar and my co-panelist, Dr. Sandeep Prasin, who's a faculty in Amity International Business School. Before I hand over the session to Dr. Singh for his opening remarks, let me introduce Professor Dr. Mark Gruber to our audience. Professor Dr. Mark Gruber is a Vice President Innovation, Chair of Entrepreneurship and Technology Commercialization, Professor at the College of Management of Technology, Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, EPFL, Switzerland. He is leading the innovation at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, where he also holds the chair of entrepreneurship and commercialization. He is the co-author of the bestseller book, Where to Play, and numerous scientific studies. He received multiple thought leader awards and acted as deputy editor at the Academy of Management Journal, the highest ranked empirical research journal in the management domain. So we're truly privileged and honored to have you here to speak to our students and to our faculty members on a very, very pertinent topic that you've chosen. And as we were talking just before the start of the session, what exactly is the essence of your talk today and how it will benefit all the students. Without further ado, I would request our Group Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Gurinder Singh, sir, to please say his opening remarks for this session.
Thank you, Mr. Bhatnagar, and very warm welcome to you, Professor Gruber. I think it's on behalf of Amity family, on behalf of our founder, on behalf of our Chancellor, on behalf of our all Vice Chancellor who are watching you live, on behalf of our all Vice Presidents, Deans, faculty members, and 175,000 strong family members of Amity. It's our privilege to welcome you. The more we read about you, the more we look at the books which you have published, the more we look at the articles, the more we watch the channels in the YouTube on where you have spoken on entrepreneurship, where you have spoken on innovation, where you have spoken on how we should commercialize the technology. We are interested more to know that how you have been able to do that for long years, which you have spent in research, which you have spent in commercializing the technology, which you have spent in teaching the basic theorem of entrepreneurship. Students, deans, I think faculty members, you're very lucky that person of that stature has agreed today to come on this webinar. And I think one of the biggest opportunities which COVID-19 has given us, that it has brought the world closer to each other. It's great to see Professor Gruber. And Professor Gruber, before you came, we had a poll where we had asked our all universities across the globe to send us the questions. And Mr. Bhatnagar is telling me that we have received somewhere about 237 questions. Don't worry, we're not going to ask you 237 questions. We have just divided them into 5 parts. So we will be asking you questions on commercialization. We will be asking you questions on entrepreneurship. We may ask you questions on innovations. We will ask you questions that what steps we need to take today when the whole world is talking about the challenges which are in front of us. Just to set a tone, I would like to give you an example of one of our students. His name is Rajat Gupta. He called us in the month of January and was asking that what is this coronavirus? And this was January, second week, I remember. And we just spoke for a while that this is a problem which is happening in China. At that time, we had no clue that it will come to India. And he said, okay, fine, sir. And then he said, sir, that if it comes to India, then which are the things which you feel that we should be working on? So we just had a chat, and that was it. Just a month back, he called up and he said, sir, I was able to make 5 times the profits on my investments, which I thought I should make in the month of January. He imported a machine of creating kits, of creating masks. Today, the mask is available in the market, in Indian market for rupees 18. He sold the same mask at rupees 88 in the month of April. Today, kits are available in the market for rupees 700. He sold those kits in the market at 2,400. At an investment of about 70 lakhs rupees, I think he has been able to earn more than 400 crores, 4 crores rupees as a profit. So I think this is one of the examples that how out of the innovation, out of the entrepreneurship spirits, how thinking of bringing some change in the life of the others can give you good profits. But at the same time, we have got questions from a lot of our alumni who are asking questions related with technologies, who are asking questions related with the virtual universities versus physical universities. We have got questions related with that, how they can become successful entrepreneurs. We have got questions that today, when funds are not available in the market, then what is your suggestion that how our students who are now thinking of starting up new enterprises will be able to get the funds? And then we have got questions from some of the youngsters who are asking that what do you want to say? Taking a job in these times is safe, or is it safe to start a venture? So we'd like to listen more from you, but then after your session, we will devote about 20 to 25 minutes on asking questions. Over to you, Professor Govind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, and of course the honor to speak to you all today. It's a true pleasure to speak at your renowned university and do this online, as you mentioned in your introductory words. This is a particular time where we embrace online education, and this enables new types of exchange. And there's, you know, as bad as the pandemic is, there are also some good things that arise from it that mean, you know, you as entrepreneurs, you have new opportunities. The business landscape is changing. And what I've assembled some thoughts along the lines of what you just mentioned in a slide set that I will go through in probably half an hour or so. But what we have enough time at the end to address the questions, to engage in a discussion, and I'm very much looking forward to that. But thanks first to be here with you. I want to start by sharing a screen for my talk today. It's really a talk that is very pertinent, because what I do is I talk to the young entrepreneurs here, the fledgling entrepreneurs who are thinking about the journey they might face in entrepreneurship, these early steps. And you rightfully pointed out in your introductory remarks that during a crisis, many things change, and you know, on the people's mind is whether they should find a salary job with an employer or whether they should start something new. And actually, if you are among the young generation, and many of you are here joining the webinar as students from the school, you have, I think at the moment, a very unique opportunity because of a couple of factors that I will outline in a moment. And what I want you to do is to be a bit systematic in how you engage in this entrepreneurship journey, that you don't jump at the first opportunity, but think a bit more wisely about what you want to do. You know, what I've seen through many research studies that I did with fabulous colleagues at the Wharton School, Ian Macmillan in particular, Jimmy Thompson, Sharon Tal, and others, is that the entrepreneurs who have done this repeatedly, you know, the serial entrepreneurs, they have learned something very special about early stage entrepreneurship. And they have learned that they should look at alternative opportunities and not just jump at the first ones, because they understood that not all opportunities are alike. Some are good, some are bad. Some are in highly contested markets, some are in growing markets with little competition, some are in markets where you have a lot of demand, some are in niche markets that are growing extremely quickly, you know, and some have lots of challenges in terms of getting the products approved through approval processes. Others don't, you know. So try to understand the features of the opportunity that you are seeing, and try to be entrepreneurial in the sense that, you know, see more opportunities and not just one, you know. And the core theme of today is along these lines. And what I gonna point out is at the end that there's a certain entrepreneurial mindset that you can develop further within yourself by doing a few mental tricks, you know, thinking about problems in different ways, etc. And I'm gonna close the talk with some reflection. But let me start with a couple of observations. This is a copy of a blog from Steve Blank that many of you probably know. He's the father of the lean startup movement. He developed lots of fantastic tools that allow you to test your ideas, your products, etc. Think about the minimum viable product as a concept. And he basically says, look, the pandemic has upended the business models of most startups and existing companies. As the economy reopens, companies are finding that customers may have disappeared or that their spending behavior has changed. Accounts receivables are stretching way out. Revenue models and forecasts are no longer valid. In some, whatever business model you had at the beginning of the year may be obsolete, you know. And what this means is that the companies out there, they need to adapt to changing markets, rapidly find new markets and new customers and new revenue models. And if we extrapolate this to startups, it basically means, look, existing companies struggle to find new turf. They might go out of business because the existing customer set is no longer there. And these times, as harsh as they are also times of opportunity. And I think this is, you know, the Chinese have the sign that, you know, they say, okay, on the one hand you have a crisis, but the other hand, the crisis creates opportunity. You know? Second element that we should not forget is that we have a sustainability crisis that is occurring as well. It is not an abrupt crisis that, like we saw with COVID, but this is a holding crisis. You know, it will get more and more severe, and that creates opportunity too. You know, first, I think it's our moral duty to preserve the planet that we were given to. But second, there's an opportunity for us to say, hey, we can actually help this crisis, try to prevent the crisis to get more severe, and figure out interesting business models around that. And third, what we are of course observing, and that you mentioned in the introductory remarks as well, is unprecedented technological disruptions. When you look at the history of innovation, you typically had technological disruptions happening, you know, maybe one or two every decade or 2 decades, okay? What we are seeing nowadays has never been seen before in human history. This may sound dramatic, but it is actually dramatic. Why? Because you have lots of fundamental disruptions. Think about everything from artificial intelligence, blockchain, drones, personalized medicine, digitalization that's still pushing through all sectors, etc., etc. So we have those in combination. And just by the fact that they are in combination allows you to identify business opportunities, not solely on one technological opportunity, but on a combination. Let me explain with a simple example what I mean. You know, if you have a blockchain, if you have a drone, for instance, okay? A drone can disrupt how you deliver small packages, it can disrupt postal services, etc., okay? If you combine, if you apply the drone in itself, it already creates some opportunity in the marketplace. If you combine the drone maybe with blockchain technology, you know, you can have a drone that, you know, maybe it flies, it can be stored securely and safely, etc. You know, if you combine then this drone with artificial intelligence, in addition, it can do even more things. Okay, so what I'm trying to point out here is a fairly simple concept. You know, the permutation of these technologies enables you to do even more things. Yeah? In addition, what we see on this slide is quite telling. When we think about technological development, yes, we have these disruptions, but over time, the prices, the cost of these technologies and the prices on the marketplace that are reflected there come down tremendously. And just look at these numbers. You know, there are sometimes, if you look at the scaling effect in the last column, it's about, you know, in terms of DNA profile of a human being, it's 100,000 times cheaper to do this than in the 2000s. You know, if you look at the price in 2007, it was $10 million US. You know, maybe a rich billionaire has profiled his DNA at that time. You know, he had his famous painting of Picasso, of Monet at the wall, and his DNA profile. Okay. Nowadays, if it costs $100, you cannot impress anyone with a DNA profile anymore. Quite to the contrary, what you can do is to embed DNA profiling in business models. Think about the genealogy websites. You know, you can spit in a tube, send them your sample, and they're gonna figure out who you're related to. You know, you might have interesting surprises there. Huh? But what it means is you have technological disruptions on the one hand, multiple of those, and in addition, the price is coming down. And this just enables enormous opportunity. You know, a friend of ours here at EPFL at the school in Lausanne, where I'm vice president, he's the CEO of a company called Logitech. They are doing all kinds of fantastic devices, from cameras that you put on laptops, etc. The mouse was invented by that. He said, look, everything nowadays can be reinvented. You know, you can put smartness into products. You can put sensors into products. And let me illustrate this with a few examples and then make a more conceptual point that is a bit larger. If you think about a traditional watchmaker, you know, it's obviously something that is core to the country I live in, Switzerland. We are fantastic watch producers, but a watch producer, you know, even if that company might be 200 years old, nowadays can put intelligence, you know, sensors into its product and become a medical device company. So that means basically, you know, you in the past you were a watch manufacturer and you can still be one, you know, but nowadays you can compete in these other domains by adding intelligence, adding sensors, adding additional functionality to your core product. And if you think about a watch, it's measuring time. If you look at the picture on the right, the medical device, it measures time, yes, and it measures a few other things. So the concept of a watch is evolving. You know? This does not mean that this watchmaker has to give up on its traditional watchmaking business, but it finds growth space in adjacent domains, okay? And this is new growth space outside the industry boundaries. And keep this in mind, I'm gonna explain this with a few more examples, but this is quite telling, you know? You have traditional businesses that can become very competitive in a different arena. Similar example, Uber. You know, there's variations of Uber services across the globe. It's you all know Uber, a taxi service company. That's how they started off. But it would be wrong to conceive Uber as a taxi service company, although they performed initially only in this industry. You know, Uber is of course food delivery, Uber Eats, and in addition, Uber is in tourism. They do Uber wine tours in Napa Valley near Silicon Valley, where they basically move people from one vineyard to the other, where they do wine tasting. Actually, when you think about it, it's not such a bad idea if you sample wine, you know, that someone else drives you. But what I want to show here is a very fundamental realization that Uber does not perform only in one industry. Uber does not even conceive of itself as being a company that is sticking to one industry only. Uber has growth space in all these other domains. You know, they basically transcend these industry boundaries that people might, you know, statisticians might place on their heads. This is a trend that we see with many other companies. Think how Google grows, some other companies, Tata has grown that way. You know, they're moving in different spaces, and they're not defining their companies too narrowly. And this has fundamental implications for entrepreneurship and how you can think about your own entrepreneurial journeys, as I will point out in a few minutes as well. Think about this example here, along the same lines. You know, we know on the left side, Apple, a company that wants to go into autonomous driving, and Apple basically says, hey, we have a couple of competences that are important in the future autonomously driving car. If you think about what a car in the future will look like, it will be maybe a car that we see here on the left or on the right, whoever cares, you know how it finally looks like. But what's important is then once you have a car that is autonomously driving, what do? You know, you don't no longer have to steer the car, you don't have to work the pedals to accelerate, etc. That does it itself. You can look outside the window, that's nice as well, but maybe only for a time. You know, so you want to be entertained. You know, you might want to work, but you might want to be entertained as well. So you are a captive audience for any type of company because you cannot escape your car, okay? So for Apple, this is a huge opportunity to basically say, we are an entertainment computer science company, and much of the stuff that has to go into the car of the future, we actually already possess. And in addition, we're also known for great design and people love us as a company. So if we can sell a car in the future, this means a fantastic new revenue model. What I point out here is a realization, number one, that is an entrepreneurial insight. Hey, we can perform in another domain, in another industry setting. You know, they did this before by saying we are a computer producer and we went into cell phones. Here they are saying, okay, we proactively go into the car space. No one mandates them to do this. They see this as new growth curve beyond the industry boundaries, okay? If you want to think about that conceptually, look at the left here. They basically, and that is showcasing what I explained a bit with the metaphors right now, but here in a more conceptual manner. What they have are competences, A and B, that are used for the iPhone, for the iPad. You know? They require, of course, new competences to produce a self-driving car. This is by far easy. You know, this is a challenge for, as we see with Tesla, with other car companies. However, what they say is core competences we already have. We add these new competences, and then we are able to produce this car of the future. Yeah? The first insight is an entrepreneurial one. The second insight is more of an analysis. How can I produce the car? Do I partner with another car company? Do I hire away engineers from another car company, etc.? You know, that's more managerial. It's not easy, you know, but it's more managerial. The first insight is the entrepreneurial one. Finally, two examples to round off, and then we look at the big picture that is emerging here. Many of you remember this company, you know, the younger ones maybe not anymore so strongly, but Nokia, you know, this is a cover from 2007. You know, this is not so long ago, you know, that we had a company called Nokia that had 1 billion customers across the globe. And here the cover, you see the CEO of Nokia on that cover, and the headline says, "Can someone and anyone catch the cell phone king?" Yeah? The logic being one, well, maybe the second or the third in the market will buy each other, and then they are larger than the first one in the market, okay? And that was always the big worry from an industry perspective. You know, number two is and buys up number three, and they become larger than number one. What happened to Nokia is quite tragic from a company perspective and the employees' perspective and everyone who had shares in the company. Because if you think, look at the left side here, 2007 on the top, you know, they had 50% market share in the world. And, you know, they went from 0 to 0 basically within 4 or 5 years. You know, think about 1 billion customers. That's every seventh or so person in the world at that time that had your phone in the pocket. You know, some had two, so it might not be exactly every seventh person. But, you know, first, it's the 0 to 0 within 4.5, 5 years. Second, what's quite striking is that it's not what we saw in the cover, you know, as a main threat, that the number two in the industry buys up the number three. Quite to the contrary, what we have seen is that outside competitors, in that case, the Apples, the Samsungs of the world, they said, hey, we can actually, as computer manufacturers, move onto that space. Yeah? And they basically dominate now the cell phone market, you know, together with some Chinese companies. So in combination, what we see here is quite interesting, because while what we saw with Uber or the watchmaker in a proactive manner, that they go in another turf, here we see from the receiving side that other companies from other industries actually encroach on our turf, you know? And that's quite interesting in terms of competitive moves, because that's not how we have been thinking about competition for the longest time. We always think about industries and industry setups in order to define competition. Final example, then I have the first conceptualization on a larger level. Some of you might remember those companies, definitely the professors among us here. What we see here is two companies that were the world leaders in analog photography. Okay, we all know that analog photography went down a very difficult path with the advent of digital photography, which was much cheaper. It took out the development processes, etc. Kodak by now is bankrupt. What Fujifilm did is quite remarkable. Fujifilm, and I show you a snapshot from their website here. Fujifilm basically said, look, we know that our primary market analog film is declining rapidly. What we also know is that we are quite good at a lot of competences that are needed to be a world-class analog film development company, okay? And it's actually a picture from their website. They said, hey, look, we can think of our company as a combination of different capabilities, competences. And from these competences, we identify new opportunities to grow, you know? So it's not like in the Apple case where they basically say, okay, we move in another domain. Here, their first domain is basically gone. You know, they are with the back against the wall, and they are extremely creative in identifying opportunities where they can grow. So they found market opportunities in producing gas barrier films, gas membranes. You see this on this little tree, huh? Sour gas membranes, ion exchange membranes, astropore filters. And on the left, there's actually a quote from their website. It's not my words, you know. They basically said, hey, we became experts in many different advanced material technologies, including coatings, membranes, organic compounds. And by combining these abilities with newly developed technologies, we can create an extremely wide array of applications, including desalination, gas membranes, astropore filters, and they're also a major company in the cosmetics industry. And what I like about this is really, as I wrote in the headline, entrepreneurial imagination at its best, because they were with the back against the wall and were so creative in order to identify this opportunity. So what do we see, big picture? Don't miss the forest for the trees. What we see is something that my dear colleague Rita McGrath has nicely depicted in her book that I can recommend to everyone, The End of Competitive Advantage, where she basically said, look, we are moving from a time when we competed within an industry setting to a time when we compete in an arena. And the industry setting, that is best explained by if you are only a watchmaker, if you're a bank that thinks about banking within financial services. An arena setting is very well explained with the Uber example, for instance. Uber moved from one domain to another. Underlying these two logics are very fundamental differences in way of thinking, but also in the way the tools you need to manage. Okay, and let me spend a minute or so in explaining that in more detail, because it's very important to understand how competition, how value creation that is behind these changes actually is changing right now as we speak. So in an industry perspective, you would look for a positional advantage, it being number 1 or 2 in the industry. Your measure of success is market share. You look at the Nokia example, hey, we have 50% market share. The biggest threat is intra-industry moves. The second buys up the third, as I explained. The key drivers for this are comparative price and quality, and likely acquisition behaviors within industry. You have tools from fantastic people like Michael Porter, who developed in the 1980s the Porter's 5 forces, the value chain analysis, etc., that help you to understand industry, how industry is set up, how you can compete with an industry, how profitable industries are. Okay, these are tools really for managing with an industry. If we now believe and think, and the examples show this very with a lot of evidence, that the industry perspective is losing in importance and an arena perspective is gaining in importance. What does this mean? It means basically as a goal that you can capture territory. Think about Uber moving from one domain to the other. The measure of success is the share of the potential opportunity space. The share of the potential opportunity space. And this is quite important to understand. This is something you can imagine. This is entrepreneurial insights. And the share that you capture is the measure of success. Okay? Biggest threat is inter-industry moves. Think about Nokia being attacked from the outside, from outside the industry. The key drivers here are the jobs to be done in total customer experience. Let me explain this by invoking that example with the watchmaker. As a customer who needs to measure the blood pressure regularly because we have a medical condition, we don't actually care so much who's the producer behind that watch. We want the functionality, and if we care about maybe the brand and that it's a fancy brand, maybe we would even prefer the traditional watchmaker, the Rolex of the world, provide us with a gadget that allows us to measure the pulse instead of a medical device company that no one has heard of, where we don't have the prestige of wearing this watch, and we nonetheless have to wear it, okay? So from the customer, it's the job to be done that matters. The likely acquisition behavior would be new capability acquisition, often across industry boundaries. Think about what Apple is doing with car manufacturing, okay? They acquire these abilities by partnering with other companies and hiring away the engineers from other companies. In this perspective, the arena perspective, where it's about growth, new territory, understanding opportunities, what's important is that you also need to have tools to manage that, okay? It's the world of entrepreneurship and innovation. So there are a couple of tools that help you to understand how to develop a business model, how to benefit in a market domain. I'm gonna talk about them as well. But the first main tool that you need to have is to understand what is your opportunity space in the first place, Where could Uber grow, Do we rely on luck to have this insight? Probably not, We don't manage by luck, So what I developed together with my colleague Sharon Tal is a tool called the Market Opportunity Navigator that I will introduce you to you in the next 10 minutes or so, that helps you to think about what the arena is for your company. And this is highly important for startups if they want to pick a good market domain. And this is highly important for established companies as well, as we have seen with the examples that that I've referenced before. Conventionally, if you think about opportunities, people say, hey, it's a lucky insight that I had. I was in the shower, I had a good glass of wine. But as I mentioned just a minute ago, this is not managerial tractable. This is not very appealing to a manager. You cannot send your whole workforce into the shower or drink, have a glass of wine until they have an idea. It's rather you want to manage your company in a way that this is not a lucky insight. Luck will always be there. I always, fully acknowledge. But there's a systematic component. And what I did with lovely colleagues that you see up here, Ian Macmillan, Jimmy Thompson, Sharon Tal, is to study this interesting topic for more than 15, almost 20 years now. And what we found out were systematic ways on how you can improve your capabilities of seeing the opportunity space. And what we saw is, which type of teams can see more of the opportunity space, what type of performance consequences this has. So just to share two core insights with you, the first core insight we had is that actually the serial entrepreneurs, and I mentioned this in my introductory words, the serial entrepreneurs are actually the ones who look at multiple opportunities before they say, this is the opportunity I want to pursue. So they go wide before they focus. Okay. The second element that we found out is that actually those companies that have looked at multiple opportunities and then focused on one, they outperform those that only looked at one. So we call the paper "Look Before You Leap." In that regard. If you're interested in any of those papers, they're available online. If you cannot find them, just drop me a line. And Sharon and myself, after being contacted by numerous companies and startups to help them figure out what is a good opportunity, said, hey, we have to do something. None of the entrepreneurs and budding entrepreneurs probably will read the book, will read the scientific paper. So we have to put the scientific papers into a more easy to digest format. And that's when we embarked on a book writing journey. And you see the product on this slide. It's called Where to Play, 3 Steps for Discovering Your Most Valuable Market Opportunities. And this is truly a book for the nascent entrepreneurs, the ones who are trying to, the scale up companies who are trying to find new market space, and also for the established companies who need to understand what's the arena, where could they go to grow, and where would they maybe suspect competition to enter the domain, okay? This is a tool that is straightforward. It's 3 boxes, 3 steps are represented by these boxes. You see this on the left side. It's a little shopping bag. It's your opportunity set that you can identify. Behind that first step is a worksheet that I'm going to show you with an example in a minute. The second step, it's about the attractiveness of the opportunities. Some opportunities are not good at all. Some are fantastic. So we qualify them here in terms of the challenge and the potential that is inherent in them. If you combine those, you would come up with a questionables: high challenge, low potential. High challenge and high potential are the moonshots. Everything that Elon Musk loves is basically up there. You have a low challenge and high potential, the gold mines, and then you have a couple that have low challenge and low potential. We call them the quick wins. These might be good stepping stones to doing something more. The third step is about figuring out where to focus. Because once you see a multitude in a portfolio, you can say, hey, I cannot possibly do everything as a startup. You might be 3 people chasing 3 opportunities, might be stretching you out completely. So the third tool is really about focusing. In the startup context, this means you focus on one, have a couple of options that are future growth options as plan Bs and keep them open. And then you have some you put away in place in storage. In the large company context, what this means is that you can pursue now a couple of options in parallel. They have more resources, they develop an innovation pipeline, and keep open a couple, and they discard a couple too. I want to show you how this tool works, actually with an example. Here's a depiction of the worksheet that support the tool. I'm going to walk you through them as well. I used the example of Flyability. Flyability is a drone company that is out of EPFL. It's a drone that is in a cage. You see that depicted here on the left side. And because it's in a cage, it can enter all kinds of interesting spaces. The Flyability scientists behind this company, they had the idea to create this company in a market-driven way. They saw the Fukushima nuclear disaster and said, hey, all these robots that come onto the site, they fall over the rubble. And the rescue crews didn't really have a good understanding of where the casualties might be, if there are casualties, etc. They couldn't get a good idea of the disaster site. So from that perspective, Flyability took this idea and said, hey, actually there's a need to have a drone that can have with a camera fly into the dust, fly through difficult spaces. And even if it hits a wall, you see that cage, it's elastic. it bumps back and it doesn't fall down. Every one of you who has flown a drone with little propellers, once you had something that is hard, the propellers break and you can basically buy new propellers in the best case. In the worst case, this drone falls down and it's broken. And Flyability realized, well, this initial market might not be as promising as we initially thought. So what they did is to engage with us in the navigator process. And you see this depicted here. This is worksheet 1 that leads basically to this little bag with all the opportunities in there. And what's important to understand is twofold. This is a worksheet that is divided in two parts. On the top, you have the abilities. On the bottom, you have the application areas and the customers. And I'm going to walk you through this with the Flyability example. But what you see here is quite interesting. We have divided that worksheet very importantly with a gray bar in the middle. Why? Because on the top, you think about your abilities independent of any application domain. Independent, okay? So basically you strip away all ideas about markets and products where this falls into, okay? These are just your abilities that you have as a company or plan to develop as a company. For Flyability, this is the unique accessibility, aviation abilities, and imagery system. And you can qualify them a bit more. You can say it's collision tolerance, decoupled light protection case, roads on any surface, operates in a range of temperatures. It can fly, it has this on-site video piloting. It also has limited flight duration because of the battery. And then it has this imagery system, thermal recall, and real-time video streaming. It's remotely adjustable and it can do what's called your post-mission analysis. You record and then look at the video stream later on. Based on those three main abilities, you can already come up with a lot of new applications. And they did this by being in a team that was diverse and thinking about many applications. And probably if we would have more time and I would ask you, you come up with applications for this drone in a cage as well. But what we see here is remarkable. You have industrial inspection, so everything that has to do with industry inspection. You have infrastructure inspection, so the built environment. And then on the right side, you have the security, search and rescue that has to do everything with human beings. And the customer sets within these application domains are everything from oil, gas, power plants. You can inspect the thermal boilers, fly up there, nuclear rooms, wind turbines, you can inspect the vessels in ships. In infrastructure, you can inspect the bridges, you can fly along the bridges, inspect those, indoor facilities, sewers, mines, maybe also electric landlines. Security, search and rescue, police forces, military might need it, rescue forces, the firefighters, if people are lost, if people are in avalanches, etc. Okay? So it's really huge, this opportunity set. And if I use Rita McGrath's terminology, this would be the arena they could play in, okay? What we see here has already 2-3 important lessons. Number one, first lesson, never think of your company as only being a one-trick pony. It can do much more than you think. At the end of today's session, I will show how this can be applied even to your own competences, because we can, as human beings, do much more than we think, okay? Second, when you have this big picture view here, you go broad. What you realize implicitly is probably that you should not call your company drones for the inspection of nuclear rooms.com. Yeah? This is very narrow. So if you want to grow in other domains, you even have to change your brand name. If the first domain would not work out, you would even have to change the brand name. So what they did was kind of smart because they picked the brand name Flyability, which allows them to do all of this over time. Huh? They are not locked in. In more general terms, what they are able to do here is to create a very flexible type of company, that is nimble and agile and can grow in different domains. Similar with Uber. Uber doesn't have to change its brand name. They can grow in these other domains without, they just add Uber Eats, Uber Tourism, Uber Napa Valley, Uber Wine, whatnot, okay? The final element that I want to point out is that, yes, we had these abilities up there, but you can add a fourth ability like artificial intelligence, machine learning. And now you can start thinking, well, if I would have machine learning in that drone, and that drone is actually inspecting the bridges, the electric landlines, the thermal boilers, it can learn its way. It learns where it can inspect stuff, where it finds a rust, and that it has to revisit every week, and it learns where it doesn't have to fly every week. So it can be much more efficient. We didn't put this here because at that time, Flyability was not thinking about embedding machine learning into the drones, but nowadays they do, So what this means is for established companies, you can say, these are my established abilities. And what happens, what can I do when I add AI? What can I do if I add drones? What can I do if I add blockchain? For the startups among you or the entrepreneurs who want to think about it, you just would say, okay, these are the competencies I already have. These are competencies I could develop, maybe by partnering up. This is stuff I could do, you know? And then you figure out very creatively, and my tip is with a very heterogeneous team coming from different walks of life, what else you could do. The big important thing is to be flexible in your head. So you put the favorite opportunities in the little bag. You see them here on the left with little post-it notes. The second step is the attractiveness map, where you basically say, hey, I look at the opportunities, I try to rate them. And what we do is to rate them with this worksheet number 2. You see that here. This is a worksheet that comes out of 50 years of venture capital research that we compiled and basically said, hey, look, there's several dimensions that would qualify the potential of an opportunity, several that qualify the challenge side of an opportunity. I don't go through all these dimensions, but what's important is if you go into an entrepreneurial journey and you have figured out an opportunity, maybe you want to start with worksheet 2 and put it in there and say, hey, is this actually a good opportunity? You might not have answers to all these dimensions, so it's also a guideline towards what you have to do in terms of research to understand if you have a good opportunity in your hands. But you might start here and realize, I have a questionable opportunity. Maybe I can think differently about my opportunity. And in this early stage where everything is mostly in your head, maybe you can easily amend it, adopt it, and get something more compelling. If we combine these different crosses, these valuations, you come to an overall potential rating, overall challenge rating. This is not exact science here, math. This is not linear algebra. This is just roughly. You know, we are still in the world of innovation. So I don't want to say you can predict all of these things. Quite to the contrary. But what this enables you to do is to have a more encompassing, complete view of the factors. You know, if you ask entrepreneurs, they always say, oh yes, I'm in a great market volume is high, we have a compelling reason to buy, but they tend to forget the other factors that shape opportunity and attractiveness. You would do this for all the opportunities, and then you come up, you know, with your portfolio. In this portfolio, you have now opportunities that are more on the moonshot quadrant, gold mines, questionables, nuclear power plants, for instance. We are not mandating you to pick always the gold mines. Some of you might pick the moonshots. You know, it's really your choice. But what you can do is once you have a portfolio, and that's the basic characteristic of having a strategic variety of opportunities in your hands. Once you have a portfolio, you can choose, and you choose your option, and the others are in a relationship with this option. You know, in a financial portfolio, this would be correlation among stocks. Here we would be saying, hey, some of the, if you're, for instance, picking the gold mine here, the power plants, thermal boilers, the product, the drone I create for this domain is maybe very similar to the drone that I need for oil, gas, and storage tanks. You know, the markets are also quite similar because it's both energy domain, okay? So what we are trying to assess with the third worksheet is these relationships. So you pick, number 1 on the top line, your preferred opportunity. Again, this is something you pick. Second, you pick pairwise combinations and assess them in terms of product relatedness and market relatedness. In the interest of time, I don't go through all of those in detail, but just look at the first pairing, power plants to oil, gas, and storage tanks. The product is fairly similar. The market relatedness is even stronger. You see this with the strongly overlapping circles. And this would, if you go down the left column, enable you to grow the venture. You know? So you would keep this option open. You do this for the other pairings as well. And this brings you to the third element of the market opportunity navigator, which is the agile focus dartboard. The opportunity you focus on, those you keep open as future growth options or as plan Bs, and those you can place in storage. Overall, what the picture that emerges here is quite powerful because it first enables you to understand the arena, the growth space, the value creation space that is at your fingertips. Number 2, it tells you, you know, what is the portfolio in a more structured way in terms of its attractiveness like. And number 3, it helps you to understand where to focus and what could be a good future growth option. Yeah? Again, I invite all of you who have already identified an opportunity to start with maybe with step 2 and assess how good it is, and then maybe move to step 1 and say, hey, we can now think more broadly if there's something else we could do. You know, so basically you mimic the process of the serial entrepreneurs. What you need here is cognitive flexibility, and let me explain this with an example also from my school. This is a professor who invented a stent to prevent heart disease. You know, so he basically said, look, I have this stent I put in the heart and I want to prevent congenital heart disease. What he could have said is say, that's my company about. But he said, no, look, Mark, and that's a slide that I got. We are blood flow technology. Wherever blood flows, we can apply this. And when you think about it, it's cognitive flexibility. It's this entrepreneurial flexibility where you design something that is of matters here. Why? Because you can say, okay, I can define it narrowly, then it's congenital heart disease. Or I can zoom out, then it's actually, you know, blood flow technology. And let me do the thought experiment with you as well. It could be also flow technology, you know, because there's a physical principle, the device. It could be in pipelines, you know, wherever something flows, gas, oil, whatever, that can be used, you know. So in that sense, it's your head, your flexibility, you know, your limits and how you can imagine that matter a lot here. And I invite you really to think about your own opportunities in that way. Zoom in, zoom out, you know, use the tool that I just presented to you to engage in this. I want to finish with two more thoughts. One more thought is, the next thought is that this is actually a tool that is has been adopted by a wonderful gentleman, Steve Blank, to the lean startup toolset. This is Steve Blank out of Silicon Valley. He's a legend there and across the globe by now, because his tool is probably the most widely used innovation tool in the world, the lean methodology. It consists of, as he writes, and this is a blow up of his website, of the blog post, of three main domains, three main tools that were used up to recently: the business model canvas, the customer development, customer discovery process, and agile engineering, which leads you to the minimum viable product. And he basically says, look, these tools help you to figure out, once you have a domain, how to play in that domain, how to profit in this domain. What these tools don't help you to do is to figure out if this is a good domain in the first place, or if there might be better domains out there, you know. So he basically said, look, I adopt the market opportunity navigator to what's in the lean toolset, because it's really adding a unique piece. It answers a unique question, and it adds, actually in combination with these other tools, it adds value in the learning journey of an entrepreneur. Yeah? What you see here is a depiction of how these tools go hand in hand. Overall, this is a learning journey. On the top, you see the opportunity navigator. You would go through this process, figure out your focal market. You would do the business model canvas for that domain, try to figure out the different business model elements, have hypotheses about, you know, revenue mechanisms, etc. You would engage in this customer development, agile product development process that we don't discuss today, but that I want to show here for the sake of completeness, and learn. You know, because your entrepreneurial journey is ultimately a learning journey where you try to reduce uncertainty. And then you learn and have feedback, and you would revise your value proposition. Maybe you would even have to go to another market because you erred in the first assessment. But this is the beauty of a learning journey for entrepreneurial ventures. Steve then blogged about a month ago, almost exactly a month ago, again about the tool, because the tool can actually help you to rise out of the crisis, you know. And this links now the talk to what I started off and what we got discussed briefly in the introduction, that you actually can say, okay, we have these the abilities in the company, and given the changing business landscape, maybe we can do something for fighting people who are suffering, or fighting the crisis by helping people who are suffering, or we can do even more. This is an example of Abionic, a company out of Switzerland. What they did is to develop this diagnostic device, and they realized that they actually can treat septic shock. I want to quote Nicolas Durand, the CEO here. He basically said, if doctors are able to diagnose sepsis up to 72 hours before a septic shock would occur in COVID-19 patients, they can prescribe an antibiotic therapy much earlier. Yeah? And what they have done is, with their device, they can identify the septic shock and realize this, you know. This is their market opportunity navigator, so they would have the abilities listed up there and the different applications that they can address. In this first batch of applications, they would have the customers down here, okay, in COVID-19. You know, this would be intensive care unit patients, and they can do a lot of other things with the intensive care unit. But this is basically the application for COVID that they realized they could engage with. Yeah? So to summarize, if you want to learn more, there's of course the book. It's available in English, German, Chinese, Vietnamese, French, Spanish this year. I think for most of you, probably the English version will do well. It's available everywhere. I invite you also to visit the website. It's listed here, wheretoplay.co, you know, not com, but co. You can get lots of free material on this website. You can get the worksheets there. You see videos there. You get newsletters if you want to have them. We have a free online course on edX. We have the flyability case on YouTube. And if you have any questions, please email me. You can also follow me on Twitter with my account, Mark B. Gruber. And soon we also have an app where the process can be actually done on your computer. Okay, that makes it more accessible. I think for many of you who want to do this by internet and be flexible with your computers. With this said, I come to my black slide and stop the sharing. And I want to thank you for the attention. And I'm sure we have a couple of questions that we can answer to the top of the hour. Thank you for the attention.
Sir, please unmute. Sir, please unmute.
Thank you, Professor Grover, and what an impressive presentation you have given. And surely, I'm very 100% sure that students and our large number of faculty members, deans, vice presidents, they will surely like to read your book, Where to Play, and will discover the most valuable market opportunities. But we have got a lot of questions for you. And first question is from, there are two vice chancellors who are very patiently listening, and also the president of Amity Science and Technology Innovation Foundation, Dr. W. Silvamurthy, and Dr. W. Silvamurthy, Professor P.V. Sharma, and two of our very learned deans. They are asking question. I'm combining that question and asking to you. They are saying that normally there is a tussle between the scientific temperament and entrepreneurship. So scientists, they are able to create a technology, impressive technology, great technology, but very often they face a challenge that how they should commercialize it and how they should brand it. Because at the end of the day, it is the customers which are most important. So do you have any formula or do you have any suggestions for the scientists that those who are able to create technologies, how they should be able to commercialize and how they should be able to brand, and then how they should be able to find customers? Over to you.
A fantastic question, because I think it's one of the key challenges that we face in getting value out of technology. Technology in its own has some aesthetic value, some scientific value to advance knowledge. But if we want to benefit as society from technology, then we have to make that step to bring technology into an application domain. And that's basically underlying the struggle that you're mentioning, that people who are educated in the sciences and engineering, they typically lack the understanding of the market side, because that's not their training. On the other hand, business students, they try to understand the market side, but they often lack the training on the tech side. So I'm a big advocate and a big fan of this interdisciplinarity. But what we do across a couple of schools in the world, my colleague Sharon is helping me with this, is to give courses on the topic that I mentioned today, where we actually take real technologies out of the school, apply the Opportunity Navigator process. The scientists are there, business students are there. We have 10 different technologies per class. We walk them through the process. This is ultimately a process where we understand the commercial value in scientific discoveries. And that brings people who work on these projects together, and the trick is to assemble classes that are heterogeneous, and then we would say, okay, you guys work on this. And that is somehow providing the first key to this big question. You assess the commercial potential, because otherwise, you cannot get other people interested in this, who don't understand the technology. Second, this enables you to build teams. And third, then you could say what we are doing here, for instance, to provide seed funding to these young ventures. They have to apply, they get a couple of thousand Swiss francs to actually do market tests, look at the competition, and get the first prototype. Okay, so it's bringing people together and adding funding to it. Another element that we're trying to do here is to bring alumni into the picture, because they often would like to join a startup. They might be in an established company and they might want to join a startup, or they might be wanting to fund a startup. So you can build on the alumni base as well. But what your question was excellent. These are 3-4 elements that we do to address this important divide, which should not be in divide. But it has to do with education, it has to do with human capital, and has to do ultimately with the financial capital.
Thank you, Professor Grover. And this is a question from our alumni, who is right now in Australia. And it is now since last 6 years that she is there. She did MBA from Amity Business School. Her name is Anjum Thakural. She's very successful, now working in Australia for one of the leading brands. She's a operational vice president, drawing good salary. And she is very, very passionate about technology. 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 And she is very, very passion but she always had a passion to do and create something for her own. She wanted to always create a business. So she is saying that I always had a desire that I should start a business. But somehow, I would say that whether it was by luck or it was by misfortune, that I was able to get a very good placement from the campus. And then now I am working in Australia for a good company, good salary, good house. Everything is good. So someone is stopping me from inside to take a risk.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether I will be successful if I start my own venture, because I'm very, very comfortable. So what is your suggestion for a person who's already doing quite well, has got about 5 to 7 years of experience, but always wanted to become an entrepreneur? So risk of losing money will always be there. So
Yes.
Your suggestion, and she's asking for your advice.
I think what she's describing is a very typical situation. Many people find themselves in this situation. And it ultimately, it comes down, to a couple of elements that that anyone in this situation needs to reflect upon. I would say, number one, innovation, entrepreneurship is always a journey of discovery and learning and resilience in that sense, because you might err in one assumption or the other. What we help you with the tool is to assess what you want to do somewhat more solidly in the beginning. That is basically helping you to sell yourself on the idea and make maybe a jump that you might not do otherwise. Second, when you are in this situation, what we have found is that, what many research studies actually say is that the experience you bring to the table, it's managerial experience, it might be observing in innovation, how innovation processes unfold. You understand competition, you understand pricing, you actually understand a lot of things that are important ingredients to becoming a successful entrepreneur. So some of this knowledge, some of the experience is portable towards an entrepreneurial career. So what we typically see is that some of the most successful ventures are created by people in their 40s and so on. The final comment on this front, I think it's one lack of is always this link to technology. If you have been out of the school and she did a business degree, I have a business degree as myself, you need to get closer to technology. And I think being close to the university, being on webinars today, talking to the technology transfer office, talking to some scientists who might not want to start the venture, but would have a potentially great idea, would enable her to say, okay, I can actually launch a venture and I these other people together and I build my venture on this very solid technology that is out there from your school.
Thank you, Professor Grover. We have got someone who is specializing in AI. Her name is Dr. Loveleen Gore, and she has done a lot of work. Before I hand it to Professor Basim, who is also a professor of entrepreneurship, and he has got many questions for you. Her question, Dr. Loveleen Gore's question to you is on educational entrepreneurship. And she's saying that one of the things which we have observed today is that technology has changed the entire future of education. When today we are teaching in the classes, we feel that COVID-19 has given a new theorem to the education field. And students are loving it. It's a flexible way of teaching. It's a flexible way of reaching to the students. The cost will come down. So do you think that the future is, and that is what I think that at Amity we have done, we have concentrated on new age technologies, we have brought new courses, we have brought up AI, we are concentrating on data analytics, we are teaching machine learning, and we are teaching all new technologies across all our programs. But her question is, and she is herself is a IT scientist who's coming up with the new theorems. So she is saying that, do you think that in the times to come, physical universities, big infrastructure, great universities will lose their charm because students are loving this way? So do you think that the entrepreneurs of tomorrow and the universities of tomorrow and the education entrepreneurs of tomorrow will be concentrating on virtual education and physical universities will have a lesser space to play?
I think what we are facing is a technological disruption. When you look at technological disruptions in any type of industries, there will be some players who fall out and some players who will enter and some other players who will grow. And if you just put this on the university space, we will have some of the universities who are unable to be offering an attractive curriculum or where students basically decide from their experience, well, we might go to another player because it's one fingertip away on the screen. Second, so we will see, of course, some universities, well, on the lower ranks probably dropping out and not being able to charge anymore the tuition fees that are charged in some countries, and they lose in revenues. They like a business that loses revenues and drops out of the market. What I want to say for those who are in the middle and upper ground is that they have a unique chance to design a student experience on the campus. And I think it's a combination. If you think about Apple and Louis Vuitton, all the major companies out there, how they design the shopping experience. It's something we can learn from at universities to design student experience. What does it mean to be a student on the campus? Maybe have a hybrid education. And those universities figure out what a good student experience is, and people will talk about this. People, universities will be rated on that. It's about meeting places on campus. It's about innovation spaces on campus, that you cannot readily transport into the digital world. Yeah? It's about interactions, chance encounters. It's about friendships that form. Yeah? If you systematically assess what the value is of your studies, it's oftentimes also in the relationships you form. And this is not readily copyable on the digital formats. Yeah? So there will be some universities who figure that out brilliantly, couple this with excellent learning, and they will flourish. There will some that don't figure this out, and we will not see them again. So I'm not so pessimistic for the innovative schools.
Thank you. Before I give it to Professor Bhasin, I think that he has got a couple of questions which he has taken from a number of universities. Last question, which is again a collective question, we have taken Professor Bhavna Kumar, who is our Vice President, Brigadier Dhyani, who is our Dean of the Business School of the Greater Noida campus, and Mr. Jay Saini, Mr. Ashwin, and Mr. Sani, who look after industry interaction. So I think that they had got number of questions, but then we are adding it. I think that the summary of the question is that where are the funds? So they are saying that where is the money? Right now, we are living in an age where people have got ideas, but we can see that the world is going into recession. There will be a lesser demand of the products. People are firing their stuff. Technologies are great, but there has to be someone to buy those technologies. Products are great, but there has to be someone to buy those products. We don't know where the customer is. And most importantly, that angel investors, they are not coming out to invest in the fresh ideas. So what is your advice that right now, is it the time to take a risk and go for the entrepreneurial projects?
Look, what I think is very clear if you study the financial crisis of the 2008, 2012, etc., is that there are very wonderful statistics analysis about this, that kept on investing in innovation came out much ahead after the crisis, or already in the final phases of the crisis. And if we just learn from that, it's always easy to cut R&D budgets. It's always, I understand every venture capitalist who wants to keep its portfolio funds for those companies that might be fledgling because they don't have any revenues and they need fully understood. If I just look at the large enterprises, what they are facing still is unprecedented technological change. If they stop investing now in R&D, and many are doing that, they are killing the innovation pipeline that they might have built, the innovation culture that they might have for a decade or even more. Rather, they should look at the innovation portfolios, make some hard choices, and should not forget is that the world keeps on turning at the universities. Technology is being advanced at rapid pace like it was before. Universities keep on pushing with the research agenda. If they lose the touch point with the status quo of where this, or the frontier of technological development, it's very hard to catch up. So I think it's a fallacy. I think it's an easy managerial choice to cut R&D, because that has an immediate effect right now on your bottom line, but has a prolonged effect only on your competitiveness, or an extended effect. You will only see this a few quarters or years down the road, but then you feel it. So I think now the time when people are retracting others, that you are actually engaging in more innovation, getting closer to the schools, have collaborative research projects. So I fully understand the question. We see that out there, But I think the really smart people do the opposite right now.
Thank you. Professor Basim, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Professor Gruber, I must say this was one of the best presentations that I have attended on entrepreneurship. And let me just do some bit of marketing for you. Your book is actually available on Amazon. So those who are listening to us can actually buy this particular book. It will get delivered tomorrow itself. Anyway.
Thank you.
So, there are a couple of questions that I have received from my own students. One question is from Tushant, who happens to be a very enterprising student from the artificial intelligence. He's doing a specialization in artificial intelligence. Now, his question is very, very pertinent to developing a team with whom you can actually work. So can you just throw some light or share your views on how do we really pick up our team? Because if I have a killer of an idea, I should have a fantastic team to work with. So if you can just share.
Fully correct. Yeah. So there are maybe 3 observations, and also to keep also the answer succinct, because you can have a full lecture about this topic. I think number 1, it's the combination of different competences. And that means first you have to introspect and know what you don't know, and know what you cannot do, because it's truly. Entrepreneurship is typically the most impressive companies are started by teams. It doesn't have to be a small team. It might be a duo. It might be a trio. It might be 2 or 3 folks. So it's number 1, the complementarity of competences. Number 2, it's also that you can trust these people. It's trust is such an important element, and that means you need to know these people to some extent at least. It's not someone you meet on the street and we say, hey, let's do a venture. With trust, I mean, you need to, this guy needs to, have access to your books, and have access to the financial services, everything, it can write checks. And if you worry about your partners in the team and have to spy on them or have to control every step they take, that's the beginning of the end. Because then you waste a lot of time that would be more productively dedicated to the venture, towards internal team processes. Actually, when teams break apart, this is one of the main reasons that they don't get along anymore. So vet your team and try to understand if this is really a good team. And you can start with your university relationships. Some of these folks, you met for 3-4 years. If they try to cheat at exams, if they take the shortcuts, etc. Maybe that's not a good indicator, or if you of being a great companions in a team. But you have your clues, without going more in this direction. And third, I think what you need to have is also a midterm vision of saying, maybe I start as a 2-3 people team, and over time I grow. So it's you put in. So entrepreneurship is a process, and think of it like, you might have an idea, you develop a couple of ideas like we learned today, you bring people together, you talk, you engage in it, you engage with funders, and this unfolds over time, So don't put yourself under too much pressure to create a formal team right now, but reach out to other people and maybe something develops that is quite powerful for you.
Thanks, sir. One question specifically from me as a professor of entrepreneurship. I've been teaching this particular course for almost 9 years now. And something that I generally believe is that you can't teach entrepreneurship. It has to come from within. How do you basically address this particular issue, especially for those students who are actually coming from a business background and they don't want to move out of their comfort zone? So how do you, as a professor, as a teacher, as a mentor, make them move out of their comfort zone to try something new?
Very important question. I'm teaching like you, I'm teaching entrepreneurship as well, and you always have this, the challenge of getting people, students interested in the course. Some of them are sold on the idea from the first day. Okay, what you want to understand is that entrepreneurship is something that you need to discover for yourself, and enable in the course a possibility for students to actually understand whether entrepreneurship is for them. So in a way, it's waking up a talent. It's in a way, it's enabling you to realize that you are an entrepreneur. And what I once did a study on identity where you are, trying to understand who you are and whether you're fit for entrepreneurship. And there are different forms of entrepreneurship. There's, form for profit entrepreneurship, there's social entrepreneurship. And so it has to do a lot with introspection and trying to understand whether this is a career that you want to engage in. So I'm fully with you. You cannot make, we have the saying, you cannot make a dog with small legs become the best runner as a dog. You have to have a greyhound or something. But it's definitely something where people that might not come from a household with entrepreneurial backgrounds, might realize that they actually have a lot of skills.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Gruber. I think that we have got a lot of questions, but we have a limited time with us. So on behalf of our founder, on behalf of our chancellor, on behalf of our all vice chancellors who are watching you live, and on behalf of our all 175,000 students, we once again thank you, Professor Gruber. What a privilege to welcome you. And students, this was one of the leading authority in entrepreneurship in the world, Professor Mark Gruber, who is the chair of entrepreneurship and technology commercialization. But we would request you, Professor Mark Gruber, that please coming to Amity. Once the situation improves, we'll call you to our campuses anywhere. You can come to India, you can come to Dubai. And if you are in US, then please visit our US campus. If you are in Mauritius, then come to our Mauritius campus. If you're in London, then come to our London campus. We have about 15 global campuses and 11 universities in India. And we will be really blessed if you can also come on the advisory board of the Amity Universities. We will take on keeping your guidance on how we can build entrepreneurship. But on behalf of everyone in the Amity family, it was purely intellectual treat. Thank you so very much. God bless. Stay safe.
Thank you very much. Kindly. I enjoyed it very much, and thank you for the kind words. Let's stay in touch, and I'll be looking forward to our conversations. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for hosting me so nicely today.